look at your manager and look at your manager's manager and see, are they fundamentally happy? And I could clearly identify that it wasn't working. Like, I was making 100,000 a year, 25 years old, and I was just like, this is just not me. I just don't enjoy it. People would look at me in work with lunch boxes and meal prep and say, oh, it's grand for you, you're young, but when you get older, you're going to start getting fat and you won't do this anymore. And I was like, watch me. Your metabolism slows down if you slow down. If you sit at a desk and you just crunch numbers and you're miserable and depressed, of course you're going to be fat. We want to be relentless. Every day, we're going at this 100 miles an hour. We're not slowing down. We're not taking shortcuts. We're going to be relentless, and we're going to stand above everybody else.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Extrospective podcast with your host, Zach Villeneuve-Snell. In this week's episode, I am joined by Darren Lee, who is the host of Kickoff Sessions and the founder and CEO of Voix, a podcast agency. In this week's episode, we discuss the parallels between bodybuilding and business, how to break free of small town syndrome, as Darren has gone on to spend most of his 20s travelling around Southeast Asia, why the 20s are not, in fact, the best years of your life, the power of social capital and building a network around you, particularly, obviously, as Darren's done through podcasting, why his goal is world domination, how he exploded his YouTube channel with one video garnering over 16 million views, alongside scaling his agency, and why, since quitting his day job, he hasn't paid himself a penny from the business. As someone who's been in the podcast game for well over 3 years, this was such a great conversation for me to have an insight into what life could look like in a number of years if I keep pursuing this relentless mission of building and scaling and trying to reach as many people as possible with incredible conversations with incredible individuals and life stories. And Darren, because he's been on that journey, has been able to synthesize so much information, and you can kind of tell that I was playing post-it note rain throughout the conversation, trying to absorb all these little nuggets of wisdom and experience, which he can only have through having all of these fantastic conversations, relentlessly pursuing hard work and scaling up, and carving out a unique path and making a real life for himself in Bali, which is where he resides today. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share it to the story or in a WhatsApp group, as it's notoriously difficult to grow an audio-based podcast. Obviously, we've got video as well if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, but of course, there is no recommendations feature on Spotify. So if you could be so kind, if you take some value from this, I'd much appreciate anywhere that you can share it. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Darren Lee. Darren Lee, let's kick off. How's it going?
Let's fucking do it, man. Man, I'm excited for this. It's not always that I'm always on the other side of the podcast, I guess, but I like it because we can go a bit deeper on things, and I don't like to steal the spotlight of my own podcast when I get a guest on, because I think that there's like a time and a place to do that. Although you still want to add in your own opinion, right? But time and a place. So today, let's go fucking any direction you want, any question you want. I'm all open, man. Let's do it.
Well, shining the spotlight on you and looking at where you were on stage with the spotlight on you. Let's talk about Team Accomplish. What's that about?
For what is it?
Team Accomplish. Do you remember that?
Oh, Team Accomplish, the fitness coach. Oh man, that's a long time ago. I barely even remember at this stage. So that's when I first got into bodybuilding, really, like serious competitive bodybuilding. So I've always been training at a high level, but it was always individual based. So it was like I had a background in sport, I had a background in rugby and athletics. I was a 100-meter sprinter, but how many Irish sprinters do you see in the Olympics? Not that many. So then I went into rugby full time, and then when I was in rugby, I tore my cruciate, fucked my knee, and then I went into bodybuilding. And from that period, from 17 to 18, I was going like fully into training. I was in a gym at 6 o'clock in the morning before school. I was doing my leaving cert, which is like your A levels at the time. And then the problem I had with bodybuilding, and the problem which I face even today, is the fact that when I push really, really hard at something, it's like push, and there's like no return. Okay, there's like no like result. That's what I kind of see it sometimes, is that you get super lean or you get super fit, and it's like, yes, I look good, I feel good, but I kind of did win, right? And that's when I wanted to step things up. And I had Connor Carlson on my podcast very early on. He's someone that I've respected for quite some time, and I wanted to go that step further. And to be honest, this isn't too far from where I am right now, you know, even like years later, which is wanted to go into bodybuilding and really try to push the limits. And the reason why I go into kind of bodybuilding and reason why I did it at that time was because there's an extra layer that you can push or that I can push, but you don't see it unless you sign up for something. So people like Jack Hopkins always say, sign up for a fight, right? For me, because it was bodybuilding, it was like sign up for a competition. And the second you lay it down, you're going to level up 100 times more. So it was the second that I left my job that I went from 10 to a billion miles an hour, right? Because you have that fight or flight approach. And that hunger and drive is fucking sick. Like that's just what I kind of like relish in my life, I guess. And even though I competed quite young, I took all the lessons out. And to this day, no matter what I do, everything is baked in bodybuilding. Like absolutely everything. It's like I actually did a couple of comparisons on this at some point. I'm eventually going to write a piece on this, but the comparisons between bodybuilding and business are the exact same, right? You need to be incredibly patient, right? You need to do the work on your own because no one's going to do the work for you. Metrics matter. So, yeah, you can track your lifts or you can look at your lifts, but if you track them and if you track your body weight and if you also track your salt intake and you track your macros, you're going to do significantly better, right? Working with people is better than working people on your own. Having a business coach is better than having no business coach, like a training coach, which I have right at the moment. And there's all these parallels. And from doing that and doing that at I would say at a high level, right? Because it's just a level of professionalism that I would and conscientiousness I would bring into it. As a result, that's allowed me to gain so much confidence, right? And then in the business world now, if I know I have to do something that's horrific, like a bunch of outreach every morning or to do all these sales calls with $50 million CEOs, I'm like, I did all the other stuff. I literally was starving myself to death for like fucking 2 months. I can have a go off this. I may not be great at it, but I can definitely go off it. And there are some of the lessons that I think are just insanely valuable that 99% of people will never actually face in their life.
I think you can see that work ethic translated quite well to the things that you've done in more recent years and the path that you've taken. Speaking about that conscientious temperament, I think that's one of the big five psychological traits, and clearly that's something that's reflected in the bodybuilding and the work that you do. And I'm wondering where that comes from, potentially from childhood. Were there any particular patterns or elements of growing up that you can reflect on and say, oh, that's where I started to see that particular element of my character kind of come to light.
Honestly, I think it was like rooted in insecurities, right? So on a good day, I'm 5'7". Some other days, I'm 5'6". And so I'm like a small dude, right? So when you're growing up and you're a small dude and you're playing rugby, everyone's like 6'6", 6'5", 120 kilos, this, right? No matter how much I was getting like bigger, I'm not really getting like that much bigger. Like even at the peak of my bulk, I'm like 85 kilos, but I just look like average, right? But for me, it got to the stage where no one could particularly call me small because I was fitter, healthier, faster, stronger, bigger than most people, right? From like a stature perspective. And then as a result of that, I was like not really that smart in school, just pretty average dude. My brother was really smart. He's like a very high IQ individual, very different than me, very like just risk adverse, like normal dude, very professional in his career. So that those kind of elements is like, yeah, I want to get bigger. Yeah, I want to get smarter. I want to do better, right? And then when I moved into like the business world or even the podcast world, I was speaking to George Armstrong about this the weekend. He was like, why do you never stop? He was like, what is it that you don't want to stop? And I was like, it's a fear of failing why I never stop, right? And it's a positive and a negative thing, but it's just a reality of life is the fact that when I started to do my podcast, I was very diligent every single day, always moving the needle, always trying to go forward because I do not want to fail personally, publicly, professionally, whatever it is, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if I can go to the library at 19 years old and spend 6 months there, locked away, don't go out, don't drink, don't do anything like that, and get the reward, that's great. Especially with my training, like at the moment I haven't drank in like 14 months because the goal is bigger than the opportunity cost. I live with zero opportunity cost. I don't have the fear of missing out. I don't give a shit what DJ is playing. I don't give a shit what's going on. I don't have that fear, right? It's because I'm working on something that's bigger than that. And ultimately, I want something to be bigger than me, right? So kickoff sessions is obviously quite big, but I want it to be bigger than me. And I want Vox to be bigger than me as well to stand on its own. So in the business world to this point right now, what gets me going is that partial sense of insecurity, that low hanging fucking anxiety of like things are going to go backwards, and the opportunity there, right? Because I think it was Jordan Peterson from Cain and Abel mentioned about the heaven and hell analogy. So the heaven is at how things could work out. So all your contracts come true, you make all the revenue, you're doing 100K, 200K, you're doing $1 million a month. Amazing. The hell analogy is You end up back in fucking Cork, this small part of Ireland where I'm from. You're living with your parents. Everyone knows about it. You're a loser. Your girlfriend leaves you. She's with a hotter dude who's like 6'3" and like jacked, and you're on your own, right? So heaven and hell, heaven and hell. Most people will end up in the middle of the bell curve. But if you're conscientious, you'll push harder to get above that and constantly stay ahead. So it's not about where you are, it's about like where you're going. So, Christian Guzman says like proud but never satisfied. And it's a fantastic quote because it's like you look back, you're like, yeah, that was great, fantastic. Let's keep going. It's like, oh, we did 100,000 this month. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And that core fundamental is so, so important. So in our company Voix, I was thinking a lot about our values recently, and our primary value is relentless. We want to be relentless. Every day, we're going at this 100 miles an hour. We're not slowing down. We're not taking shortcuts. We're going to be relentless, and we're going to stand above everybody else. We're not there now. We may not be tomorrow, not going to be there next year, but having that relentless drive will mean that we'll just ultimately just continuously keep going forward. And again, you'll end up being a category of one. It's a great book whereby you innovate, you differentiate yourself so much. You're just in your own category. No one can compete with you, right? And that's ultimately where we want to get to with our podcast, our business, our lifestyle. Is that there? Who is there to compare yourself to? There's no one
Hmm.
because you're in a category of one.
I'm gonna steal something I often hear from our friend David McIntosh, which I feel like I'm playing post-it note rain with all these different ideas that you're coming out with. But the one of the things I want to pick out is you mentioned that you are in a place now where you literally don't care about the societal expectations of what other people might have for your life or might think that you should be doing. That you're just going to double down on really putting in the hard work, being relentless. But obviously, you're also reflecting on the fact that a lot of these things have come from a place of insecurity when you were younger, and insecurity often leads you to want to play up to people and to be performative. And so, do you reflect on any particular moment in your life where you went from caring about what people thought too much to the point where you are now, which is not caring so much and really doubling down on what you know you truly need to be doing?
I think it's a identification of like your actual potential, number one, right? Because we can all do a lot more, we can get more out of it. So it's much more like of a comparison ultimate against myself, right? If I know that I can go into the gym and train a lot better because I checked all my logbook numbers and they're all doing a lot better, or we have a very good month in the business, we can do a lot more, right? We can push harder. And I think how I started to kind of unplug, I guess, is because a lot of the stuff that I was surrounded by when I was younger, I just don't relate to anymore. I can't like have these conversations anymore. I'm not really interested anymore. So that's my part of like unplugging. So Richard Cooper talks about like unplugging from like society's uncomfortable truths, right? And I think part of my like unplugging from society was one, just realizing that all the stuff I was doing with my podcast was just so unrelatable to some people that it was just like, whatever, just I'm out just doing it. I don't really care if you like it or don't like it. Like people would literally be like, "You are like a madman. You just like don't stop." I'm like, "Yep, I just don't stop." And then I think as well, moving out of like the corporate world, I was in startups when I was younger. I was in big companies, big management consulting companies, and then I was in scale up companies. And I think over time, just identifying like who that person is, who that trait of a person is, and how I just didn't really want that to be my personal trait, right? So Yusuf Smith always says to look at your manager and look at your manager's manager and see are they fundamentally happy. And I was able to like look at that in multiple different domains, and I could clearly identify that it wasn't working. Like I was making 100,000 a year at 25 years old, and I was just like, this is just not me. I just don't enjoy this, right? So, and again, James Smith says this is that if you're good at something if you're good at something you don't enjoy, you'll be great at something you love, right? And that's the way I kind of framed this stuff. Was like I was relatively smart, I was disciplined, I was consistent, and then when I went to approach like let's say a career, yeah, I was doing well and I was getting promoted and all this stuff, but I just didn't really care, right? And then it just didn't really like satisfy that part of my brain. Basically, I think a big part of like that unplugging aspect for me came from just uncomfortable like truths of like reality, right? Is that when you're growing up, you're often like living someone else's life and you're being told exactly what you want to do, right? It's like a form of conditioning, is that you don't go off build your own thing because it's risky. You don't go travel, you don't go away, you don't live abroad because it's like a bad idea. You should like live local and all this kind of shit, right? So all of these things I was just kind of like seeing that they're all like fake, right? People would say like, oh, like you work for a company and you become wealthy. And I can clearly like scientifically and mathematically pointed out to you that you can't, right? You just can't, right? Job stands for just above broke, right? Because of that reason, because for someone who is a business owner, I can tell you that the whole idea is to deplete the cost, push down the costs, because that's not where you make your money, right? So that's what a big aspect, even if you become like a partner in these companies. So all this kind of stuff started becoming a little bit more apparent to me, I guess, as I became older. And then I would see the flip side to it, the stuff that wasn't being told to me. And I was like, well, this has worked for this person who I've met on my podcast or who I've met, and it's progressing and improving. And I just realized that that area of the internet seems loudest, but it's actually quite small. And there's not that actually many people kind of doing it. So that was kind of like a big kind of element to this, you know. So I had done a lot of that work, for instance. So that's why it's not like I'm like someone shitting on a 9 to 5. I had done it. I had made a lot of money from it within reason. So I can safely say like that's like a lifestyle I didn't want to lead, right? And it was also like the return on investment just wasn't what I actually really enjoyed. So then I was able to say, okay, that's the opportunity cost. I don't have that anymore. I don't want to go do it. And now I can go apply these principles to multiple different verticals in my life.
I realise we're kind of fast forwarding much more to like more recent conversations, and actually, it'd be interesting to understand where the kind of origins of coming out of uni and going into the world of work, and then obviously along that journey, figuring out why you actually started the Kickoff Sessions podcast and stuff. And so, I wonder if you could just kind of
Man,
briefly give a kind of synopsis of all those kind of things.
100%. So I did business information systems in university, which is a combination of like software engineering and business, right? It's a pretty decent degree. When I was in third year, I did a placement at a investment bank in London, and I was working at this investment bank, and I was up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I was in the gym at like 6. I was like getting after it. I was in work at 8, and people would literally say to me like, "Why are you in work at 8? Like you should be here at 9." And I was like, "Because I've work to do. I literally wanted to work, right? And I wanted to work at the weekends on projects from Monday to do, and I was being told not to do it, right? So I was seeing like like this kind of like play out. And one thing I realized as well is that like lifestyle was just so not for me. Everyone was like, let's go for beers on a Thursday. And I was like, I don't even fucking like beer. I don't want to do that. I want to go training. I want to go do other things. So I was kind of like seeing these things develop. And I also realized that like a lot of these people were quite unhealthy, quite unhappy. At lunchtime, people had their head down at desk. It was a pretty sobering thought going in and seeing a lot of people out of shape, unhealthy. And I was like, this is just not what I want to do, right? Like, not at all. So then at that point, I was kind of like eager to start building something. And the first thing I ever did was an e-commerce store in London, which is actually selling vintage clothing, 90s clothing, early 2000s clothing, which was super hot in 2017, 2018. It was just it was like perfect timing, right? I had met the guys from True Vintage, it's a big company online. I actually had met him in person. His name was Roy Westbrook. And he gave me like a lot of inspiration. So I went off to do it myself. And I done pretty well, like relatively well. And then we had a couple like trademark issues, a couple like supply chain issues, all the shit that happens when you're 21, right? And you're running a business. So I was like, all right, out. But a guy said to me on in the company, he was like, the money you make for yourself will mean more than anything you'll ever make for this company. And that always stuck with me in my head. It just fucking straight and stuck with me. I could never get out of my head. So even though I'd get a paycheck at the end of the month, even though I'd like lost a shit lot of money on my own store, it would mean more to me when I'd see like an order come through from Shopify. I was like, what the fuck? It actually worked. So I got back to university. So then at that point, I was so tempted to not go back to university. I was going into my final year. I was going to stay in London. My parents were like, come back, finish your degree. And I was like, oh, fuck it, I'll do it. But the condition was that I would come back as long as I could work a full time role in a startup. So I applied for a role in startup in Cork, where I'm from. And I messaged a guy on LinkedIn. This was the first spark for LinkedIn in my head, which I just was like years ahead on LinkedIn. So in 2018, I was doing cold outreach on LinkedIn, asking guys to work for free. This guy gave me a 30K salary. I was working full time with him in a startup, building a startup. And at night, I would work on my university degree because it's fucking easy
I was going to
anyways.
say that's during final year.
During final year, so I did my final year. Hold on. I did my final year project, which was building a fitness app, which basically, which was a Amazon. So we're connecting fitness um, fucking professionals to people who wanted to pick a fitness coach. I created like an Amazon marketplace for fitness coaches. I created it in 2 weeks, right? The first like Halloween bank holiday, I created it all in 2 weeks, and then I chopped the whole thing up and I just released it over the year. And that was my final year project. So I had all this time to work, right? So I would just work 9 to 5, and then I would go into the office. I'd leave the office. I'd go up to university. I'd smash like fucking just like chicken and rice. And then I'd work on my college stuff from 5 to 9 to 10, and I would train at 10 and be out of the gym at 11, right? So all this was kind of like working together, and I was really enjoying the startup. Things were going really, really well. But of course, someone told me to go apply for a big company, and I got an offer from a big management consulting firm at the time. That's when I went off to do that. So I'd gone from making decent money, really good money, being able to travel. Like I was traveling loads with it and everything. And then when I finished university, I had a shitload of money to go traveling. I spent like 3 months in Asia at the time. And then I'm in this like management consulting firm. I'm one of everyone. I'm the same as everyone. So I have way more experience, way more life experience. Where after making a shitload ton of more money than I'm even for the company itself, but now I'm just one of many, right? And that's when things for me I started getting like super down. I wouldn't say depressed, but I was like going into COVID, super run down, like didn't really know what I was doing. I was in this company, I got like promoted, and I remember asking for a double promotion. And they were like, no, we're not giving it to you. And I was like, why? I literally was like, why? I was managing this big project and for like $1 million a year because of like lockdowns, they threw me on this project and I was managing it. And I was like, I'm doing enough to generate that amount of revenue, and they wouldn't give it to me. Then at that point, I was at like peak trough at that point, as in, no idea what I was doing, no direction, no idea what I wanted to do. I was just like relatively experienced individual who basically was directionless. That's when I read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and I pretty much realized that whatever we're going to do, there's going to be suffering in it. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. It's going to be extremely difficult. But you need to choose your suffering, right? Or you, at least if you can, you want to go pick your suffering, because there's suffering everywhere around you, but there's also joy in the suffering, right? For me, I just didn't want to find joy in trying to become a partner of a management consulting firm. There's no joy in that. So I prefer to have my suffering elsewhere, which is my fitness, my training, everything from there. And that's when I started moving on to, I would say, better companies, which gave me more of like an entrepreneurial kind of like mindset. And I was always kind of prepping myself to kind of get these skills to get ready to go and jump. And to be honest, I could have done this at any point, right? Because you don't really know how hot the fire is until you're actually in the middle of it, right? So that was the kind of idea, was that, to be honest, wouldn't say I regret it, but I could have just done these things sooner. But that's what life is, right? It's someone who's semi hesitant, who jump in and jump in and jumping out, and then decides to go do these things. So that's kind of full circle. That's kind of some of my earlier, I guess, motivations, I guess, before I started to have, I wouldn't even say direct clarity, but I mean just narrower focus.
So, Kickoff sessions, then, your podcast, it's nearly been going for 3 years. What was it like trying to set that up and sourcing guests? And I mean, obviously now you do that on scale for clients and are making pretty good success out of it. But what was it like when you were just starting out?
So I forgot to mention that. So one of the reasons why I started kickoff sessions was when I was in that moment whereby I really didn't know what I wanted to do. The whole idea was I had to escape my current environment. How do I get out of this current environment, right? And how do I actually do it logically? So for me, I could have went to build like a business, another e-com store. But what I wanted to do, and what I would advise other people to do, is like do something that's social, that builds social capital. Because I was someone who could not leave my current environment. Nobody knew me. I knew nobody, right? So I couldn't pull like favors or anything like this. So that's why I was like, fuck it, let's build a podcast. And the reason why I wanted to build it then is because I knew I could get to pretty much anyone. And my podcast was very careers focused in the very beginning. It was helping people get to a COO or a CEO position, which I wanted to do, bear in mind, in particular companies. And then from there, I was able to just really double down on that. I started with audio only for the first, I would say, 6 months. And I heard Chris Williamson speak on a Habits podcast, which is by, forget the guy's name, but it's called Habits. And and Chris Williamson said the biggest regret he's ever had was the first 6 months of his podcast, because he never started a YouTube channel. And I had done exactly that. I didn't have it. So you lose all that capital. But at the time, I didn't even know what I was doing, right? I was just fumbling with stuff. But it was funny because, again, back to the principles and the habits and the routines. I was working with a company. I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, start scheduling out my content, start writing content. At night, then I would do a lot of guest research or editing at the time. And then at the weekends, then it was pretty much 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., just working on the podcast, seeing different stuff, learning, like really trying to figure out like where is the cracks in this stuff. Like someone's cracked it. These people have cracked it. Like what's like the art and science to cracking this, which is distribution, right? Once you crack distribution, you can pretty much do anything you want. But cracking distribution is like very, very difficult to do. It's like an art and a science, and that's where a lot of the value is in. So I guess like over time, it was like working with what we have, exactly what you have right now, right? Is that you're working with the resources you have, as you mentioned, but then just seeing, can I make one small adjustment, right? It's kind of like with your diet, right? If you go from 0 to 100, you're just going to give up in like 20 minutes, right? But if you started to eliminate some of the bad food, if you then started to exercise more, if you then started to maybe adjust some of your food, and then maybe think about your calories, and then maybe write down your calories, you can slowly see those small increments. So for me, it was like, I have no video. I went to video, and it's like I was using my phone. Now maybe let's use a webcam. From there, maybe let's use a different backdrop. There's a light. Let's use a better light, and just small over time, adding in these small different changes, and then just seeing those results come back. So you need that feedback loop, right? And I could see that I make a change and would make a huge impact. And it was just, I think it was like seeing something that no one else was seeing and being like, this will work. This can work. And at the time, again, I was doing careers content and I was getting a lot of inbound opportunities from younger people who wanted to get into finance, tech, sales roles. And at the time, I was doing one to one coaching, just ad hoc kind of stuff on the side. And I was like, what the fuck? I'm barely operating and I'm getting to this stage. Imagine if we start getting like super scale. Like, how do we keep on scaling this and see like where it becomes? And I'm not particularly driven towards like, or using my fucking podcast as a marketing funnel. I'm just saying that when we crack those distribution channels, it's very valuable to me. It's very valuable to other people, and that's pretty much been the origin of my company as well.
I think when I reflect more broadly, and not only on why I started the podcast, but just looking at why people start podcasts in general, it is often from a personal curiosity perspective of like, as you say, like you were gunning for these positions, you were interested in breaking into this area of business. Therefore, those are the people that you were having on the podcast, and you were not only bringing people along for the listen, but also it's just your genuine curiosity sat across the table from someone that you would never in a million years be able to have access to the people and just be like, can we just sit down and have a 90-minute call and I just ask you all these questions? But you can do that with a podcast. And I think that's been the most powerful kind of reflection for me, is like, wow, like I have such not a selfish, but I have an access to these people that I can provide value, but also get value from it as well. And I saw somewhere you tweeted that the
100%.
internet is a network game. If you build a big enough net, it does the work for you. How has that played out with the podcast over time?
I don't know, did I invent that or did I hear it? But if I did invent it, I'm going to keep on using it. I've probably heard that, right? But it's interesting, right? If you deconstruct the word network, it is a net and it is work. If you cast a big enough net, it will do the work for you, right? If you throw it out into the water and you catch a load of fish, catch a load of sharks, you catch a load of whales, the whales will start doing the work for you, right? And that's basically how the podcast works now at this stage. Is that I don't call in favors. I was speaking to someone recently and I was saying that I never, ever, ever ask a guest to do something for me, ever. Just not in my values. I wouldn't message a guest being like, "Can I have an introduction, please?" It's not in my nature. Instead, through literal universe theory, I know this is very esoteric, but like over time, these things are just fall into place, right? It's just how society works. We help other people, it will work, and over time, it just kind of works. So for me, even in the very early stages of just being able to change my mindset in terms of like thinking bigger in a career aspect, how can I apply that through my podcast? And some of the people that are meeting took me really under their wing, you know. And people like Simon Ray, who was on my show, I've recorded like 5 podcasts with him at this stage, and he really walked me through that process of like how to think more independently, how to be more open minded, not telling me anything, but just walking me through this process, you know. And as time has gone on, I've gone on to do deals with other people as a result and gone on to do like amazing things. And some of them are my best, literally, some of these people are my best friends because you'll find this as well. When you're in this kind of sphere of whatever you want to call it, right? The podcast space or just the online business space or I call it the getting better space, right? Because we're all just trying to get better. The people you cross are just you. They're just you, right? And I was on a call with a guy recently called Luke Ward, who was on my podcast. I actually wanted him to do work, to work with him for my company. And I asked him, I was like, write me the fucking bill. Let's go. Let's do it. And he was so nice that he could identify that he actually didn't even need to help me in that point. We were actually just genuinely just mates, and that network was so strong that he was like, "We don't need to work together right now." He's like, "You go off do your own stuff. We'll come back in 6 months' time." Because we're just very similar, it was a very open conversation. I was able to get to these different stages, and I think that's very helpful for anybody. And you know, people always talk about like how to build a network and all this. you can do it in multiple different ways. But what I like to say about podcasting is the fact that it's omni-channel, right? We team up. We're like all working together. We're all like on this mission together. If you just start posting Instagram videos, sure, I could actually have a better personal brand. That is true. I do find that people sometimes don't even know my personality because I wouldn't really get it across that often. So I'm trying to introduce that a little bit more, I would say. But you don't have the network. You're just someone working in a silo. And I do not want to be on top of the mountain on my own. I don't give a fuck about it. That's not what I want to do. I want to be with other people on a similar mission and I want us all to succeed. And for the people who try, for the people who buy the ticket, there's room on top for everyone else. We're not just going to drag someone randomly across who's obviously just trying to leech your time. But people who invest in it and they work hard and they really contribute, there is room at the top for everyone. If you go to Everest these days, it's a fucking queue to get up to Everest. It's like 50 people at any time trying to get to the top of Everest, but they all work together. They all bought the ticket, right? They all put the work in. And people always talk shit about that, saying, "Oh, it's become too easy." It's not. It's because the collective mind of how people work together has now meant that we can all get on top of Everest. But you couldn't, and I couldn't right now. But if you tried, you worked hard, I fucking guarantee you could do it.
Also in a literal sense, it'd be pretty mega to do something like that. There's a couple of
100%.
questions that kind of tied together that I have off the back of that, but I think the main point really I'm trying to understand is what differentiates that conscientious temperament that we've kind of alluded to so far in the podcast that has served you so well, and that kind of risk taking, that dissatisfaction with just staying in the corporate and wanting to go above and beyond. Like, what do you think that spark is to differentiate you from people that feel like they can't make that leap and that risk? I mean, you mentioned your brother earlier and said, you know, he's quite risk averse, and obviously in your position, you've got to be relatively risk loving when it comes to making the jump and obviously moving out of Ireland, which is something that I want to talk about a little bit later on as well. But what's the differentiating factor there?
It's being able to identify where you're currently at. Most people are making it up, and most people will say, "Oh, it's fine. We'll work on things in the future. It's fine, whatever." But it's really looking at like, who am I? Like identifying like where I currently am at, and am I currently happy with that? Is this the path that I want set out for me? So when I see something that's positive that's being reinforced to me literally by society, which is like, let's say a job promotion, and I'm just like, whatever. I'm like, I don't really care anymore, right? That's a big telltale factor for me, like that this is not fulfilling that aspect, and you deep down feel that, right? If you are, Jack Hopkins talks about this recently. You know, if you're living in like a normal neighborhood, you're driving like a normal car, and your family are like happy with you, but deep down you're not happy with it, and you've picked the wrong path, right? Because like this is not a path for you; it's a path that someone else has assigned to you. If you don't have a plan, you'll be assigned a plan, right? So you need to be able to differentiate that. And through my podcast, I was able to I was able to speak to all these dudes that have done it. So they've all done this. They've all come to a point where they said, enough is enough. And as a man, you have to realize when enough is enough and just say, okay, I need to take action. I need to take control here. And then it's about looking at, what do I have? And Tate speaks about this too. And Tate was trying to build from the very beginning, and he had like nothing. He said he had like $40,000 in the bank account, which actually is quite a lot. He had like a car out front, and that was it. He was like, "What?" He said, "What can I use right now? What skills do I have that I can go and do something?" And that was a big thing for me. It was like I had a background in product, which is like building mobile apps. Very, very difficult to build a mobile app. A lot of things involved in it. But I'd learned a lot of stuff about like building, product design, human psychology, how people consume stuff, how people interact with stuff. What did I enjoy? I enjoyed podcasting. I was good at it. I was good at speaking. I can move conversations, right? And I can persuade and I can sell. Because all you're doing with your podcast is you're selling. You're selling your ideas. You're selling guests to come on your show. It's all an aspect of selling. So I was like, right, where is the intersection here? And what do I enjoy doing? Because again, there's suffering and everything, right? But if I want to leave my current environment, which is suffering, where do I want to go to that's better, right? And then I could leverage on what I have. Now, identify that I didn't jump in to build a fucking AI GPT tool, right? That was not what I was interested in. I was interested in podcasting. I was good at it. I could see that there was some sort of opportunity here. I'm still building, by the way. We're still in the very early stages of like where we can potentially go to. But I could set out this vision and map, right? And being able to really forget about the noise, because everyone else is going to say that it's like risky, because they don't have the vision that you have. And also, they shouldn't have the vision that you have. They shouldn't be looking through the lens. If not, if those, and it's very cliche to say, but like, if your goals are not big enough and they're not scaring people, then they're not big enough goals at all, right? If you're like, I want to leave my job to match my salary working like this like local business, and your mom's like, yeah, good on you. That's like not what it is like. And I said this to my dad the other day, like joking. He was like, when is enough enough? Because the company now is at a good stage, right? Where we're big. We got a lot of employees. Well, not a lot. But we got a good few employees. It's working well. We have big accounts. And my dad was like, "When is enough enough?" And I was like, "The goal is world domination." And I was joking, but I wasn't at the same time, right? Because as a man, that's a fucking hunger, right? That's moving forward, is world domination. Now that's obviously a very extreme analogy, but to some degree it's correct, right? Because you want to be going up and up and up and up and up. And you can't do that if you're working just a regular job and that's what you want to do. So you identify those ceilings. So we go back to the bodybuilding example. And this is why at the moment I'm getting slightly disenfranchised with bodybuilding, not in a negative way, just about like, what can I actually do with it, right? Because when you're dieting, you just diet. It's over. When you're working a job, that's it. It's over, right? So if you want that killer instinct, if you want to be able to move up and really push hard, you need to find the vehicle that allows you to do it. Heaven and hell analogy back again, right? This is what's achievable. Yeah, we can burn it all down, but is that really even going to happen, right? There's ways and means to mitigate that, because as you mentioned about risk, 100% is risk in it, but there's risk in everything, right? And there's risk in staying where you are. The biggest risk is actually staying where you are, and especially in like a career. If you think, oh, it's fine, we'll get promoted in a few months, you're the dude from Facebook that gets cut. That's it, right? If you're like, oh, it's gonna work out, whatever. When the cuts come in, you're the first one to lose your legs, because that you're aligned the spreadsheet, right? And it's actually quite similar with a podcast or similar with a business. The biggest fear is staying the same, right? If you stay the same, it's over. You can move backwards. You're either moving forward or backwards. Revenue is going up, it's going down. You're not going to hit the same revenue every single month over and over again. You're not going to hit the same cent in your bank account, and then you're going back. And yeah, you can readjust, align the sniper again, and get going forward. But fundamentally, you need to take those steps. So I'll give you a real example. Company grew really fast, really, 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 really fast, and I needed to hire. Hiring's tough, really difficult. It forced me to take a step back and actually slow down a small bit for like a month, for like 2 months, for us to take 50 steps forward. And now we've actually got to that stage, and I'm very grateful that we're at the stage where we have a really fucking good team, and we're able to just go vroom, 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 keep going forward, keep pounding, keep closing deals, keep moving, because we actually took the steps, right? But if I stayed still, nothing would change. We just start going backwards. And you can either go sideways or backwards. I would just say you're going backwards, to be honest.
People often talk about compound interest when it comes to habit stacking and obviously that payoff over time, that return on investment. But people don't often talk about a very real problem that we see in the global economy right now, which is inflation. That at the same value, your value just gets eroded. And I think it's exactly the same as you're describing there, where like if you're not going forward, you're going backwards, and you need to be constantly having that vision. And it's interesting that you mention that goal of world domination, and just like reflecting on earlier parts of the podcast where you were mentioning that some of the reasons why you began doing bodybuilding and trying to like make something of yourself maybe stemmed out of insecurity. And I'm wondering, you know, there's some people who would be satisfied and happy with life just being like a monk on a hill, and they're like they found internal peace, right? Um, Something for myself, I'm satisfied wholly. I'm a Christian. I think that of course, there's external metrics of success and things that I want to line up to be able to provide and serve, but ultimately, I have that kind of inner foundation. So I'm wondering, like, obviously, I don't disagree with having the goal of like world domination, having like a real high aim that is relatively unattainable, but you're going to get really close to it. But where do you think it plays in with like, the question that your dad asked, when is enough enough? Like, is there any kind of thoughts there about when are you going to be at peace with this stuff, even after world domination? No, I think that there was a sorry to go on, but someone quoted to me last night. It's just popped in my head. It's like you could give someone the whole world's worth of gold, and it would still not satisfy one soul, because they'd still be like, oh, is this it? So yeah, question.
It's a great question, and it's about reflecting in those moments as well, sometimes being like, yeah, things are going really, really well, right? And like not just continuously moving forward, forward, forward. It's about actually like stopping and slowing down. And again, I'll give you a real life example. So recently, I'm still dieting right now, but I went from like 85 kilos down to 73 kilos. I'm 73 kilos right now. Pretty lean, whatever. The goal was 75 kilos. But when I got to 75, I was out to my coach. I was like, I can go so much harder than this. I was like, I'm only in third gear, maybe fourth gear. And he was like, all right, let's keep on going. We were meant to finish the end of June. It is now the beginning of August. And then, recently enough, at 73 kilos, I was like, there's another percent of body fat that can come off. There's another step to go up. Let's go another gear. So I'm in like fourth gear right now. I think we can go to the fifth gear. So we're actually going to extend it another month to go down to 72, maybe a 71 and a half, which might seem like light to a lot of people, but that would be like very, very like detailed. And then at that point, then we could assess the physique and see like, is it actually great or not, right? And that's what I'm gonna like think it from is like, where do we push to see like what like true excellence is, and how far can I actually push, right? Because when you're on that bike and it's 32-degree heat and you're staring into the sun for 35 minutes, like you really see what you're made of, right? So I think being able to find where that kind of like the tethering kind of spot is, whereby like it hurts, but it doesn't hurt too far, but push further, right, and get better. And I think the idea then is about building something that you are truly proud of. Like I'm like very proud of my podcast, but not for me. I'm actually not proud of it for me. I'm proud that people get a lot of value from it, because for every person that messages me, and I probably get maybe 5 messages a week, right? I'm not like fucking famous. I would like to say that 10 times those people at least got some bit of interest out of it, right? So out of those messages, that's kind of like how I would determine it. And that's great, because I went through that period where I was unfulfilled, I was drinking a lot, partying a lot, and I did not have those different modalities. So that satisfies that part of me. Then of course, I think on the business side of things, we do, again, I have that world domination path, but that's very much like a masculine path that I want to like, just fulfill, to see like how much can I push and what can I do with what I push, right? Like as in, can I literally, and this might seem ridiculous, like, but like answering these questions, like, can you literally do $1 million a month? Because someone else can, right? That's what someone else has done it. So why can't you do it, right? That's the way I kind of think of these things. But then there's that other side of me, I guess, which is the more personal side of things. So myself and my partner, we do a lot of dog rescues. We have a lot of dogs. We have a lot of like a lot of our roots are based now in Asia. We do a lot of rescue missions and all this kind of stuff. And we give back to like local communities, a lot of stuff. So that's a big proponent of what I kind of want to do. And that's a big reasons why we're building a lot of this stuff, right? Because we're helping younger people through the podcast. We're helping me through my own business, because we're trying to grow the shit out of it. And then we're also helping other people who do not have the same opportunity. And I know a lot of them are like animals and stuff like this as well. So that gives me more flexibility. So I like to think that the more you succeed in one vertical, the more you can succeed in other verticals, right? And that's why people kind of go into philanthropy and whatnot, because yeah, you're right. There's a diminishing margin returns of like, actual like pleasure from something. But then there's also just like the craft, right? There's like the Dakota Robertson says, like, people like people who succeed like truly love the game, right? People who are interested in the game. Like I don't give a shit about like the latest trends, the hot trends, and all this stuff. I'm building something that's sustainable, long term, that will people will get a lot of value from in the future. I can help a lot of people too, and that's kind of the way I think about things, right? I'm not trying to just niche up, and I think that's a big barometer too of how you can judge someone, is because they're not really interested in anything. They're just jumping around random stuff, right? So that's kind of how I think about this stuff in terms of I'm happy to keep building as long as I'm healthy. I'm happy, things are moving right. No, it's not a detriment to my relationships or to my family. Then let's keep building, right? Let's not get complacent. Let's not stop, because we're not affecting anyone, even myself. And let's keep on going. If I have to go from 12 hours a day to 14 hours a day, and it's fine, then let's do it, right? It's fine. That's what happens.
And that like real grinding is something that I've definitely admired from the outside in your work ethic that I've seen. And one of the angle.
It lacks though. It lacks though, doesn't it? It's lacking in society. I feel like that sometimes I get a little bit disgruntled by this stuff, because it's like people are like, "Oh, but you need like balance," but it's like you've never actually worked hard though. You truly don't know what hard work is, right? And I think travel is really good for that, because I spent a lot of my 20s in most of my 20s in Asia, in different parts. It could be in Vietnam, Thailand, it could be in Laos, it could be Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and you truly see what hard work is, right? You drive around a rice field and you see dudes in 35-degree heat in heavy mud pushing a rice maker, whatever the fuck it's called, like a true rice field. And those go. I was with a guy yesterday. He was saying that his dad, who works in one of those rice fields, got bit by a snake recently and was rushed to hospital, had to get anti-venom and almost died. That's hard work. You pressing buttons on a computer is not hard work, right? It might be tiring. You might need to take a break every once in a while, but it's not hard, right? Because hard work is all the other stuff that people do. So the reason why people think that it's hard work is because there's that extra effort to get more out of it. Whereas if you had nothing, you would view that as regular work. And you're from, the UK, a lot of people in Scotland, Wales, even Ireland, have lots of difficult manual labor works, like working on farms and whatnot. And in the remote areas, they don't have the right machinery and stuff. That is fucking hard. What we're doing is difficult. It's logical. It requires a different part of your brain. It can be quite strenuous, but like, is it really that hard though? And are you working as hard as what you could be? This is the biggest thing, right? Because no one shares the same vision as you do. But especially if you're looking at these other companies, which I saw firsthand, man, when I was in these bigger companies, people who worked hard would turn a colors of a spreadsheet around or would change the presentation fucking deck, right? And I just would literally look at this stuff and just be like, this is literally nonsense. Nonsense for me, nonsense for you, nonsense for this company. So I think it's about having those like unplugging beliefs, like being like, that is not hard work. This is not hard work. The real world is what's actually difficult, right? And that's what you're always kind of trying to reinstate in your mind is the fact that, yeah, we're extremely lucky. We got to capitalize on that to some degree because we've been given this opportunity. So I think absolutely we should be working harder on a lot of this stuff because what's the alternative, right? We just complain about it. We and like the Western world is so bad for this shit, right? They'll spend a full like 3 days outside a government building with a picket fence, like complaining about some bullshit versus actually just taking matters into their own hand, right? They just complain about shit, watch the news, and give out and post things on the internet versus just going to do the work, right? I don't give a fuck who's in politics. It has zero impact on the results, right? Zero impact whatsoever. So that's the difference, right? I think it's just like a different choose your problems back again and back again. I chose my problems to be scaling a fucking company versus talking about who's been re-elected into an absolute scam of a political society across all of the world, right? It's just reality.
Yeah, it's like be the change you wish to see is a very cliche quote, but it's very true insofar as you can sit and complain on Twitter and outside government buildings and take absolutely no responsibility for the situation you find yourself in, or you can just take action, try and be of some value, work really hard. And it actually it reminds me of something you said there of something I had Elliot Hulse on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he said that most of the problems are just fake problems, are just clouds, it's nothingness. Like I'm sending emails, it doesn't actually exist. Like it's all just technology nonsense stuff. I'm sat behind a computer, I'm not out like with a massive ruck, toiling away in the fields and providing for my family in the same sense. It's not physical, it's not tangible. And actually, not to take the conversation in a different direction, but that could probably be ascribed to lots of our mental and physical ailments right now, as we see in the West and more globally, right?
100%. And you create your own luck as well, right? Like I think this way it's quite interesting. So for the examples that I used, which was someone in a rice field, it is very difficult for them to change that situation. They have to do the most that they can, right? And I applaud them. I have a lot of local friends. We all try to help out as much. Like a lot of my cleaners that are here, a lot of people that work like inside our house here for like the pool and stuff. We always like try to take care of them, offer a lot of help, whatever we can help, right? But for the people who can do stuff, so you come out of somewhere like the West, like in Ireland, right? Create your own luck. I don't give a shit what you say, right? So you have a computer, you have Wi-Fi, we have the basic stuff done. Tick. We got a laptop. Tick. Go. Like literally go. Because at that point, you create all your own luck. You can complain, you can sit about it, or you can start building things up, right? You can build your brand, you can build your name, you can get your name out there, you can learn more. All this shit is fucking free anyway. It's all on YouTube, right? So you can pick anything, like literally anything. Like I mentioned I did the vintage clothing. I had no idea about vintage clothing. I just picked it because I was interesting. And I just picked it, went at it, and then I obviously changed over time and did other stuff. But you could pick anything and get to 80% or 90% within 6 months, right? And you could get ahead of pretty much anyone within that 6 month period if you have focused work. But what does everyone else do? They go out the weekend, they drink, they put shit up their nose, they're smoking, they're complaining, they're blowing all their cash, right? The 200 quid you picked on a night out, you could have bought a fucking course for $99 where someone will give you 20 years experience and insert it into your brain, and on you go. It's literally off you go, right? My friend Tim Stoddard, I was running into, he's an agency doing $250,000 a month, which is $2.5 million a month, a year. I was speaking to him because we're close friends, and I was saying that I've had loads of issues with this, and this. He sent me his course for free, which is literally $100. It's called Agency Clarity. I went through the whole thing in around 4 hours. I just 2x'd it, went through the whole thing, and I downloaded his entire brain and inserted it into my brain. I did it after the gym, in the gym with my laptop. I just went through the whole thing and I learned it, and I learned a load of stuff and just went off and did it, right? So you create your own luck. I had Tim on my podcast. We built a good relationship. He's someone that I can speak to openly. I spoke to him about my issues that I have. He sent me his course for free, bear in mind. And now I am 10 steps ahead of where I was. You create your own luck, right? So if you're sitting there thinking that, oh, I'm a victim, everything's very difficult, I was there. It sounds like shit, right? But nothing's going to change unless you change. Alex Ramosi says you have to want to change to change. So, and I often find this too when I'm speaking to people on a podcast, or not a podcast, on a sales call. I'll tell them exactly how to do something, exactly how it's done. I can show them 10 other examples of people that are like them, but some people just don't want to change. They don't want to change. And as a result, I'm like, all right, okay. Like, I try my best. We walk through the process. I showed you how to do it. But if you don't want to change, so be it. That's it, right? And there will always be that bracket of people, but you can obviously remove yourself from that bracket. You can just start deleting yourself from that spreadsheet and entering a spreadsheet of people that actually want to get better and actually improve.
Well, the immediate thing that was on my mind just immediately left as soon as you as soon as you stopped speaking. But one of the things I wanted to pick up on that you said earlier is, I mean, you've mentioned it. That you obviously kind of grew up in Ireland, then you've been traveling and moving around in different places in Southeast Asia for most of your 20s. My line manager currently is Irish, and it's been quite interesting because I don't really have many Irish connections or friends, and it's been interesting asking him lots of questions. And a common theme that he's seemed to allude to is that there's generally a very close family connection, and a lot of people when they in Ireland, when they go to uni, they travel back home like almost every week or every other week, right? He said that Thursday night would be the night out because they'd all travel back on a Friday. And I'm wondering, like, how you managed to break free of that, or whether that was even a thing for you to kind of go out and travel, or whether I've just completely made that up.
So you are completely correct in that assumption, right? And my partner's American, and that's a big thing for me as well, right? Is that the fact that I have someone who's from like a different continent as a partner, we just think differently constantly in terms of like where we're positioning ourselves, right? But that like small town mentality, I don't know where it comes from. As you mentioned, like Ireland is a pretty traditional place, like people stay like within there. But for me, it was always like the thinking bigger. It was like watching like, I don't know, like Shark Tank or Dragon's Den growing up or things like this, right? Or then seeing even travel shows. So watching even like Top Gear of them in like Vietnam when I was really young, being like, what the fuck? Like this is sick. Like, why isn't all the world like this? I was looking out in Ireland, it was like raining 24/7. And I was like, why am I not there? And why am I here instead? And it's like better cost of living. So lower cost of living, higher standard of living. That's what I always go back to. Higher standard of living, lower cost of living. Why am I not there? Like, what's the reason why, right? So it was having that like belief, and then looking at all the limiting factors. So even when I was in, it was always about like going somewhere new, getting somewhere new. So the first time that I was like really traveling was like, as I mentioned, was like when I for a longer period of time was when I lived in London, and then I remember just seeing like everything better. So big, so buildings bigger, people more ambitious, salaries higher, right? More diverse. You'd be speaking to someone who's like on the trading desk who literally came from like Costa Rica, right? And the guy like literally learned trading on a fucking back of like a book that he initially learned and got into some like Goldman Sachs like internship. And I'm just thinking in my head being like, if these guys are moving at this pace, like this is the pace, this is the pace. Why am I not on this pace? And of course, I didn't want to live like that London city lifestyle in terms of like, kind of chasing just like random corporate hierarchies. But it started getting me to think bigger. And then when I started doing a bit of traveling when I was younger, firstly it was like spending some time in like Greece, whatever, wasn't very much. But then myself, and my best mate Tom, we were doing traveling across Europe, interrailing, right? So now I'm in Munich, Prague, Poland, Croatia, Ibiza, meeting all these different people. And not these people weren't like entrepreneurs, whatever. They were just thinking differently, right? They were just people that were more on the travel side of things. And that's when we started unlocking the early days of Asia. So I'll never forget, I was like 21 years old, got out of Bangkok airport, and I guess I can still remember the smell. I can remember the feeling of the heat, and I can remember the sound of the taxis. And I was like, that's it. That was it. The whole thing for me just clicked. It all just clicked, right? And I was like, this is it. This is what I love. I love the madness of it. Every once in a while, you got to take a bit of a break from the big cities in Asia, right? But it just like clicked. And like, I love the food. I love the training. I love the lifestyle. And I have many friends that are based in Bangkok. They're based in Jakarta. They're based in Singapore. They're based everywhere. And these cities are all different, unique. But it was just like that element of like freedom and the fact that, yeah, like your travel days aren't numbered so that you go back and work a shit job, right? You can go and do other things, you can build other stuff. And at that point, I was still working a corporate career, right? So I was meeting people who actually were like email marketers or were like actual drop shipping back in like 2016, 2017, and actually doing a killing. Like I remember Matt Kelly was saying that he was in Bali, pretty much similar to when I was in Bali. It was about 2018, 2017, and he was making like 100K a month, and he was like 21 years old. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, I was in a hostel running Facebook ads for my stores. And when I hear this now, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, right? Like, how did this come about? So it's having that kind of like diversity in it. And a lot of the people that I traveled with or that I met traveling ended up being my mates going forward. There were guys that, based in San Francisco, whatever. So then when I met my partner as well, I had gone back and I was working in a consulting firm at the time, and I met her who was traveling, right? So she is also a traveler. She was doing solo traveling, and we just like got on like a house on fire, very similar people. She was traveling Europe. I would meet her at the weekends, just randomly fly places, and then we ended up going to like Asia together. We did a lot of solo traveling together. We spent a lot of time in Central America together during the scamdemic as well. Would you believe? So I was literally in these places with nobody around, and of course, and that's when we were very much like in our own insulated world, where it's like, okay, like I don't give a shit about all other stuff that goes on. Like you can bring in another crackdown or whatever you want to call it for 6 months, and all right, I'm just not going to be there. I'm just going to be somewhere else. So that's kind of the way I kind of view things, and it's like, and it's funny, right? Because when you're younger or when you're trying to like go into your career and stuff, people like look down on that lifestyle of like traveling and all this kind of stuff, right? They're like, oh, well, whatever. But over time, I've seen these same people who bought the lie and now are like immigrating to like Australia. Like loads of Irish people are in Australia some at this stage, right? I didn't even know that. The only reason I knew it is because I have like a mate who's actually also doing it, and I was like, actually, how I do know that is I was in the sauna and someone said that they're so sick of all the Irish people in Melbourne. I swear to God, that's what they said. They were like, local people in Australia are like really fucking sick of the Irish people in Melbourne. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Like that's like the reality. Sometimes there's so much people coming influx, but again, it's the uncomfortable truths in life, right? That you're told this is safe, that's the risk. Over there is bad. The grass isn't always greener, which is true to some degree, but most times it is, right? And the grass is fucking pretty green in Asia a lot of the time too.
It's also pretty green. Well, I don't know if there is real grass in Dubai, but one of those things that
No.
I've really been paying attention to in this conversation is just how that kind of risk taking and that desire to go beyond has manifested itself in so many different ways, whether it's the bodybuilding or starting the podcast or looking at your manager's manager and seeing, okay, that's not exactly it. I want to try and sort my own thing out, starting the agency, etc. And obviously in recent kind of year, maybe few months, you've really seen progression and scaling up with your own podcast kickoff sessions. And if it hadn't been for all of these micro steps of risk and going and living out in Southeast Asia, all kind of scaling up and building along this side of this stuff, you wouldn't then be in the position to take the risk to go, you know what, I'm gonna, and I don't even know how much of a risk this was for you at the time, but to just go to Dubai, get a few guests lined up and booked in, like proper, big tier guests, right? Which is then paid back like a millionfold with had a short that had like 16 million views and like exploded the YouTube channel. But that's not an overnight success. It's been a clear product of all the hard work, and it's well deserved from like the last number of years. And so I'm wondering, as you were scaling the podcast, as you were doing this kind of lifestyle in Southeast Asia, what was the moment where you were going to go, okay, let's commit and actually really try and level this up with the videography and the content and the guests?
I think again, for a long time there was nothing really happening, and it's always a Nike tick kind of growth. But Luke Belmer put this really well on another podcast. He said that the bamboo plant does nothing for like 5 years. It just sits in the floor, right, and does nothing. And then I think it's like a couple of years, maybe 3 to 5 years. And then after 3 to 5 years, the bamboo plant will just burst through and then just take off. And within 5 weeks, it has all of its growth above the surface. And that's kind of a good way I like to kind of think about things, is that you keep knocking, you keep chipping, you keep breaking it down, and at one point it's going to break through, right? And as I mentioned, you start adding in some extra stuff. So doing those tours is something that I actually like really want to do. Like I want to make kickoff sessions a real global brand. Now running them can be quite difficult sometimes, and organizing them, but that for instance as well, like that cost me like $10,000 or some shit, right? And because the flights, the hotels, the booking, the time, all this kind of stuff. But you do it because you're giving more opportunity. And if it doesn't work out, maybe it's not going to be, right. And I do have plans to do more tours in the future, maybe a US tour. I need to see how that works with visas. But if I could do like 30 days in the US or something like this, record a bunch of podcasts would be awesome. But again, to the point, it's just about the principle, right? It's just like going after something and then really, really committing to it, and you'll see the growth for over time. So I'll give you like another example. Like so, with our business, you know, it was really touch and go in the beginning because I had an idea, which is that I can bring this podcast model to enterprises and B2B companies. And I was like, okay, this is the idea because I've seen other guys do it. I've seen other companies try it and fail miserably. So maybe I can inject this principle in and grow it. And of course, like nothing was happening for ages, and then it all happens at once, right? You have like contracts coming through. You need to start getting all this kind of stuff, like all like the legal stuff kicks in, all this kind of shit. So I went from like 0 to 100, and it's quite similar to every other aspect of life. So it's having that level of just absolute just tenacity in everything that you do, because eventually it will break through, right? And you will get a lot better. So even where we're at now with the business, like it's rough some days, most days are rougher than other days. But the problems that we have now will not be the problems we have in 6 months. And same my podcast, right? The problems that I have right now will not be the problems that I have in 6 months. And they're bigger problems, and you choose your problems, right? So especially with our podcast now, we have a lot of, we're thinking bigger. It's like, how do we think like really, really big? And how do we think, how can we get like, to your point, with the 16 million views, how can we get 16 million views on everything? Because we did it once. Why can't we do it over and over again, right? And like, that's the abilities. Like, how can we crack it over and over and over again? Because that's what the game is. And like, you're more in love with the game versus the outcome. And that's what's interesting too, is the fact that a lot of our clients, like obviously we're results driven and we're outcome driven and all this kind of stuff. But I take a step back and I always kind of show them like where they were and where they are, because like it's all about the process, right? They put the work in, they level up their camera, they level up their audio, they level up their content marketing. We've started doing operating on omni channel, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, all this kind of stuff. And you see all the benefit we've had from that, or the improvements. The, you're going to click through at some point, you're going to break through at some point, right? And it's about having that. And I think that's very much more a character trait, as you can tell when someone's just in it for like, I need the dopamine now versus delayed gratification. So the longer you delay the gratification, the better results you're going to have effectively, right? So, and that comes from bodybuilding, doesn't it? It's bodybuilding. That's what it comes back to, is just delaying gratification for as long as possible. how can we how can we go from 75 kg to 71 kg, and what does that look, and like how does that feel, and how does it affect me? And even last night I was like lying in a bed, and I had a sales call at 10:30 last night, and I was like fucking exhausted. It was like 9 p.m. and I was really tired, and I'd been working since 5 a.m. So where are we now? We're like, it's like 20 hours into the day. So up at 5, working to 9, training midday, back then from like 1 to like 10. And I was like waiting for this call, and I was starving. My stomach was like really sore. And I was like, this is what hard feels like. This is when you double. This is when you double down, and we get on, and everything went pretty well. All that kind of stuff. And it doesn't even matter about what the result was, right? The result is irrelevant. It's the fact that you did it, and then I got back up at 5 again today. Do the exact same shit again, right? There's no breaks, right? That's their approach.
There's an element of romanticizing that like pure grinding hustle that you see from David Goggins, Jocko Willing, like these kind of like top figures that are kind of really pushing for mental discipline and working ridiculous hours and putting the hard work in. Do you think there is a point at which you'll be like, let me scale back and find more of a balance, or is it because excuse me, or is it because like right now you're really trying to scale up and you don't know when that point will come? Because I've had conversations with people in the past, you know, and it's something that I think about a lot with balance is like, and I know we touched on it earlier, it's like, sure, most people don't know where the limit is. You've got to find that limit and then dial it back to 95%. But at some stage, you know, I don't know what your particular goals are, obviously, like world domination as being this like a kind of lofty arbitrary thing, but where is the room for balance and enjoyment in that?
It's about adding in the stuff that you still enjoy, right? So I still surf twice a week. So every single week I have it on my diary. So I have all my goals that are like my targeted for the month, right? And some of them are like company related. They're very like they're KPIs for a company. And at the bottom of it will say surf twice a week, right? And then so that's the thing, right? And I'm doing my saunas every day. I'm shitting an ice bath, but I'm still an ice bath every single day as well when I go to the gym. So it's about getting all those points. So for me, it's all open, right? We can keep on going. So as you get bigger, different things change, right? So I'll give you, for instance, like within kickoff sessions, I was doing everything for a long time. And then I hired a designer, and then I hired an editor, and then we hired a operations manager, and he just runs the stuff in the back end. But I'm still obviously doing the outreach stuff for this, right? So you change the problems, right? We were talking beforehand about like, how much volume do I need to do that's actually quality to be able to do 2 episodes a week or even 3 episodes a week. So this is the stuff that I'm trying to like balance with. So the problems just change, right? Because there's always going to be problems. So if I scale it back, like, I can literally sit on a beach. I literally was at the beach like 2 hours ago, and I do enjoy the beach. But I'm trying to say that when we make these like adjustments, what's the adjustment for, right? Same, my partner, we're still able to like go for dinner and have a nice time, and everything's really enjoyable and things like this. But I don't want to be swapping what I'm doing now for something on Netflix, right? That would just fucking that's just not what I want to do. I'm interested in the game, so I like the fact that we're thinking about different kind of stuff. And I try to keep my focus very narrow, but there will be a point whereby we'll build a different vertical within Vox. So it could be a different offer, could be a different platform, it could be something a little bit more, maybe a little bit more scalable. Just different things, right? Because we have a few things that are going on in the business. We have Podcast University, which is a big learning platform, and then we have Vox. So what I'm trying to say is that I'll always be in the game. It's just about how do I realign this focus to make sure it's narrow, but it's focused on something that I enjoy, because I do get enjoyment from it and I get fulfillment from it, and it's like an achievement, right? And I feel fulfilled, and a lot more fulfilled than working for someone and then just getting like a random salary, and that's the end of it. And for context, bear in mind, I don't even pay myself, right? That this is how much I'm like involved in the game, right? I don't pay myself at all. I make $0 an hour and $0 a month, because that's not what it's about, right? My lifestyle is super minimal, very very minimal. I live on less than $1,000 a month, which is just rice and fucking chicken. And this is not for everyone, right? And Gary McGowan says that like I'm showing you my life, I'm not telling you how to live it, and that's exactly what's happening here. I'm just telling you what goes on behind the surface. I'm not telling you how you should live yours, right? And I don't think that I'm at a point whereby I should pay myself. I just have like savings because I had like lots of stuff going on over the years, and I'm 27, so I'm obviously going to have some bit of wealth obviously accumulated. So I'm like, all right, how can I push incredibly hard and give myself zero reward? Zero. And if I wanted to go buy a Rolex, man, I could, but that's not the point. It's not the goal. I don't give a fuck about the Rolex, right? I'm interested in the game. So I honestly think I'm going to do this for at least another year, and just, yeah, see what happens. And then whatever. But I think that's pretty cool, right? Because I'm in it for not the reasons why you think I would. Now, I still want to build a really big company and do really good with that, but I don't pay myself, which is hilarious. And I could, but I don't want to, because it'll take away that fucking killer instinct, and I'll take away that real drive in the morning. And that's what keeps me like actually grounded, right? Because I'm like, we're moving forward, we're not getting a reward, we got to keep going, got to keep going, and that's it. And that's the way I kind of approach things.
It's nuts reflecting on and I won't get specific, but the numbers you were throwing out before we started recording as to the place you've got to versus now hearing that you don't pay yourself anything out of that. And I think that's
Man, you see all the clothes up in the corner. These are all the clothes that I own, right? All I own is gym clothes that are like 3 years old, right? Like a pair of like Adidas girl shorts because I like girl shorts because they fit better when I'm training legs, right? I have like this shirt that my girlfriend got me like a year ago, and that's like basically like all I own. I don't buy myself clothes. I don't like do stupid shit. I bring my girlfriend and her family out for dinner quite frequently, and then I just pay for dinner, and it's like nothing, whatever, right? It's a grant, and that's it. I ordered chicken and rice every single day. I didn't even have a microwave in my house, so I was drinking oats straight with water. Bear in mind, up for the last 3 months, right? Imagine what that would taste like from a shaker, oats straight, and that this is literally like I'm saying how simple I can make things, right? Like the simplified approach, a minimalistic approach. I didn't give a shit. Like I actually didn't even care. I just had oats and protein, and then I had chicken and rice, and that was it. And that's the irony of it because and then when I see other people, not in the online business space, but I just see like, you know, the mortgage, the rented car, or the hire purchase car, or whatever it is, the golf club membership, and the person's making like $6,000 a month at some like tech company, and like they think that everything is settled and it's all okay, but that's not how like that's an artificial view of the world. Like you think that like someone has your back, the company has your back, it's all okay, but I think that's a very skewed way to look at the world, right? So we're building, we're working really hard on it, we are delaying gratification, and that's how it's going to work, right? Because there's going to be periods whereby things are going really bad, and I had someone in my family that was like quite sick recently, and we ended up having to pay a lot of money um, for medical bills, and it was a lot of money every single day. Like every day it was like whatever, like a couple of thousand, whatever it is, and then I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like because that's the stuff that we're kind of building around, right?
powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. That's something really interesting that I hope people can take away and really chew on and reflect on, because I think especially in a material world where we're sold this dream of lifestyle, like you say, the rented car, the mortgage, the things, the stuff, but actually, as you've been able to do, move out into a far more minimalist way of living, and obviously have the potential and the capacity, and your kind of market value as an individual has been like skyrocketing even since quitting the company and like trying to set up your own stuff and building the network as well. It's just like it's all elevating the long term, delaying gratification. I think that's super admirable. I realize time wise, obviously we're coming to 8:30. We've got one question to
We go ahead,
yeah,
go ahead, go ahead.
yeah. I've got one question to sort of like reflect on the journey that's been, the conversation that's had, and then okay, well, where's your head at for taking things forward, and do you plan to settle down anywhere? Do you ever plan to have like a family? You like, what's the point at which you find that balance that we discussed? Because you only just quit your kind of main job, what, like really a few months ago, really. So obviously everything's still kind of new and finding its feet with the agency, and you're 27. So yeah, where are you at with moving forward?
So I think just the plan going forward is that I'll always be based in Asia, but the plan is to be able to like travel quite frequently. So even though we have a basis here, the plan is to be able to have like multiple locations. So whether it's like here or whether it's like Dubai or it could be even like Central America too, which is close to like my family or my girlfriend's family's um, family because they're based in the States. Even things like this gives us lots of flexibility because if anything happens, you can get up and move, right? You're not your location freedom, everything's pretty fine, right? So that's one kind of vertical. In terms of like family, as I mentioned before, or not I mentioned before, actually, sorry. Like I'm actually not particularly interested in like kids or anything like that. I actually have zero interest in that. This is not in my frame. Um, my goals are just elsewhere. It's not what I actually want to do, right? So that's why I kind of eliminate those things. It's not really what I'm interested in. So it's just mainly about building. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in building. That's what I like doing and pushing those kind of barriers. In terms of fitness, there's a few things that I'm like scoping out about what I could potentially be doing next. Um, for me, as I like to say, there's going to come a point whereby I'm going to start leaving the bodybuilding space and going into the running space because I'm like originally a runner. So I would want to go back to running, but not sprinting. It would be long distance. So I had a background. I've done like marathons in the past. I'd like to go into like the deeper ultra marathon stage, the real dark sides of the mind. I think that's what I'd really like to push hard on in the future. But there comes a stage whereby that becomes viable. And even though I've ran marathons in the past, I don't know, do I want to do it right now? So it's about over the next month, I'm going to be scoping out like a couple of fitness goals for the next 12 months. Um, could be big, could be small. We're going to have to see with my coach, and it's just about building.
You can get into your Ned Phillips era and push for the
Yeah,
ultras.
that's going to happen at some stage, and like Ned is a huge influence on me as well, from a business perspective, just from a life perspective and everything. He's played a huge role, and the role of a mentor doesn't tell you what to do. He just shows you how he did it, right? So that's the difference of what someone like that does for you, because that's my 30-40 year goal would be that I would be in this space whereby you're just a category of one doing something that you enjoy. And again, like, I don't need to be doing it because I want to do it. I don't give a shit. Like, if people see it, they're gonna see it because a lot of my stuff is documented online, right? They'll see it on the podcast, they'll see it through whatever. So it's not like people won't see it. It's the fact that I'm not doing it so other people will see it. I'm just doing it because it helps me and it might help you too, right?
Can I pose a question? I think you might have an interesting answer to this. So
Mhm.
it's quite popular in culture for people to, when they get into their 30s, 40s, 50s, to reflect back on their late teen years and early 20s, like, oh, those were the best years of your life, like, enjoy them. And from my perspective, that's always coming from a place of like, just because you did that and now you're living a miserable life doesn't mean you should impose that expectation on me. And you strike
100%.
me as someone who's just going to continue building and continue scaling up and traveling the world and doing all this stuff. So what's your perspective on that?
So do we have time? Do you have time? Because I have all time in
Yeah,
the world.
I have till like probably quarter to nine. Yeah.
Okay, we'll finish up in 10 minutes. So I know why that is. And the reason why that is because they bought the lie. They have the mortgage, they have the kids, they have the car, they have the job that they're stuck in, and now they have a set of skills that makes them invaluable to the whole market, but valuable to a certain employer. So they're stuck. That's how you find yourself stuck. You are now in a stage whereby you have a lot of people that are dependent on you. You're actually not making that much money in the beginning, so it's very difficult for you to be able to go and do different things, right? There, if you look down on people like me or like you and begrudgingly looking down at people saying, oh, why are you doing this for? Why don't you just do something else? And they set up themselves up for a miserable life. Like, it's actually a life of like misery that they've snookered themselves into. So you do the opposite. You don't get a mortgage. You don't take the easy route, which is a salary. You really work hard to build up and do other stuff and build capital. So we're building social capital right now, right here. We're building wealth capital too. We're building like location freedom. So if something happens in the world, we can get up and go. And we're building those different variables, right? And we're leaning into what we actually enjoy. So if we can follow a lifestyle of that and leave the other stuff behind, then it's completely fine. So if I do exactly what I'm doing right now, I could potentially maintain or do this type of thing like forever, right? There's no reason why not to. And also, when I was in my early stages in careers, people would look at me in work with lunch boxes and meal prep and say, oh, it's grand for you, you're young. But when you get older, you're going to start getting fat and you won't do this anymore. And I was like, watch me. I literally was like, watch me, right? And people were like, oh, your metabolism slows down. Your metabolism slows down if you
Yeah.
slow down. If you sit at a desk and you just crunch numbers and you're like miserable and depressed, of course you're going to be fat, right? It's just like, of course you're going to be fat. It's just like reality. But if you're moving, you're active, you're doing different stuff, you're like learning different stuff. Like, I literally learned how to surf. I learned like a year ago, and then I'm picking it back up, and it's like a whole new motor neuron skills, right? It's like all this other shit going in my brain, and it's like really exciting and like new. And it's awesome. I love it. And I got off the water today, and I was like exhausted. Before I got on this podcast, I was like lying down. I was like, I need to recover because I'm wrecked. But it was like great for my body. It's a lot of time in the sun, happy, energetic. Went for a coffee earlier with my girlfriend's mom, and it was just really nice. Whatever. And I was like, yeah, I want to be doing this stuff when I'm 40. And I know people that do that when they're 40 and they're 50, and they're super healthy. Everything's good, right? So, and they might have children too. They might have whatever. It's just not in my lifestyle design. It's not what I want to do. I just chose I don't want to do that. So I can do this other stuff. And it's not about fucking around in a random hostel, right? I'm gone between those days, but it's about exploration, adventure. like satisfying that part of my brain. I just had a conversation with my partner earlier, and I was like, let's just drive for 4 days. I'll bring my laptop so I can work, but let's just like spend 4 days where we'll do like 200, 300 kilometers, bring the dogs, do a few other things, and we just see what happens. Just get a few Airbnbs. And she was like, okay. And I was like, all right, just keep on seeing what's happening, right? Just seeing what's going on in the world and pushing harder.
Especially when people have 6-month plans, 5-year plans, everything's kind of laid out. You don't allow yourself to be interruptible and spontaneous, and just in that regard, especially with location freedom, it's so powerful, and something that as you talked about much earlier in the podcast, with the fact that like information is like infinitely abundant and there's no excuses. If you want to do something, there's all the information on YouTube. It's like just don't have any excuses when it comes to making money online or trying to do that kind of thing. And you've been able to very clearly build all of this from coming from the small town syndrome that would have been imposed on you in Holland.
Literally nothing. So like I love my parents, and they come from like very average backgrounds. Like my dad he's an exterminator, drives a van around. My mom was like a healthcare assistant, which means like she helps out and like in like a in like wards in a hospital. I don't even know what she does. And like I had very little money growing up, but they gave me the best opportunity. They drove me to trainings, they brought me to this, whatever. And I'm like, okay, if that's the situation they were in and they gave me everything, then why wouldn't I push as hard as possible? And I always joked to my parents, I don't joke, sorry, I say this extremely serious, but they don't believe me half the time, is that my plan is to build a massive fucking villa in the middle of Asia that has an east and a west wing house so that my partner's parents can live on one side and my parents can live on the other side. And like, I want to do it, right? And if they, if they want to come, they can come. If they don't want to come, we'll fill with dogs, right? So, and it's just kind of like that, like just different style thinking, right? And I'm not doing this to show it on Instagram. I'm doing this so that because I want my parents to live with me because I want to take their care of them because they took care of me. When most people's their kids don't even fucking talk to their parents, right? Um, and that's kind of like part of my plan too, is like to be able to really help and support a lot of them, especially when they retire, and just being able to, finance everything, whether it's like as medial as like the end of their mortgage, right? Just like this kind of stupid shit, right? Is that just being able to help people that helped you along the way is incredibly valuable, which most people try to forget about.
Yeah, you said that the feeling of we made it will always be so much more satisfying than I made it.
100%. I don't even want to do it on my own. If I had the option to do it on my own, I wouldn't want to do it on my own because it's like miserable. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's not how life should be felt, right? And I've done that in the past. It's kind of soulless. It's MOBA.
So if you were to kind of summarize everything that you've been through and learned and repackage it, obviously this is what you do also with clients and what you share on a day-to-day basis on LinkedIn, which I find like super valuable, especially as when I was starting my podcast and I was following you, I was like, wow, this is just like golden nuggets every single day. What advice would you have for someone who is in a place where they have an idea or they have a vision? Doesn't have to be podcasting, can literally be anything, with content creation or pursuing a business, whatever. What's the actionable piece of advice that people can take away from listening to this?
Find someone that has the desirable results that you want. So whether it is like an online business, whatever, right? So someone in that vertical, just find someone that can be this overarching person that you want to get to, right? And follow their exact step. Like if they're putting out advice, follow them down to a T. Have that version as a north star because it's better to move towards a goal than no goal at all. So if someone has dominated like an e-commerce space, we'll just use that as an example. So like a Matt Kelly, for instance, this guy who like has grown space goods. I think I don't know what he's doing now. At this stage, like 2 or 3 million a year in revenue. If he is your overarching person you want to become, use him as a mentor. He actually even has like courses and stuff. He's lots of free stuff as well online, and you have that person moving towards it, right? Then you're gonna have to start like actually letting go of all the other stuff. So if you spent a lot of time during the day, whether it's on social media or consuming the news or consuming bullshit, extract yourself from that scenario. Remove yourself from that scenario and start to reprioritize yourself, right? Because in life we can't focus on, so it's a big sales thing, is that you can't focus on two things. So if I'm speaking to you and trying to bring you through a journey, you can't focus on two different things. It's only one thing, and you sporadically move between them. So you're going to need to slowly start shifting yourself over onto that different parameter. So if you are building something and it's on the side of your 9 to 5, which I was doing for many years, you need to be able to like go fully in for a couple of hours a day, at the weekend. You're going to need to take weekends off. The stuff that we need to eliminate the bad shit. So if you're doing a shitload of drugs the weekend, drinking, you're out late and all this, they're the low hanging fruits. You should get rid of them all, right? Start removing all these bad habits from yourself, building up that capital, getting that money back in because you're not spending on stupid shit and reinvesting it into yourself. And over time, it might take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. You'll start then slowly seeing that reward, and then you're just going to double down the reward. And that was the biggest thing for me is a feedback loop is positive. We're building something that's substantial. We're getting the reward, and we're ready to move forward. And some people will happen sooner rather than later, but it will happen if you don't give up. It's like inevitable. All this stuff is going to work in the long run if you just don't give up. You stay fully committed.
It's Alex Hormozy, isn't it? It's if you put in so much work, it would be unreasonable, like physically unreasonable for you not to see the upside of that at some point. And I think that's if that's one
And
thing to summarize everything that I've understood from this conversation, it'd be you've definitely followed that principle.
if it gets to a stage whereby the risk of doing something, so the percentage chance of you failing is like so much lower than percent chance of you succeeding. There's like a higher percentage that this will succeed 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now versus the percentage chance of it not working out. And it's kind of like going to the gym. It's like if you just go to the gym, you're going to get like healthier. But if you go to the gym and fix your diet and fix your sleep and fix your recovery, the percentage of you getting really fit is going to increase. So we're just trying to swing the pendulum in our favor. And over time, we can get there. And over time, we will get there. But you need to have the right modalities, I like to say, in place. And you start again adding them in. I didn't start doing saunas every day for fucking 20 minutes before I went to the gym and got my nutrition right and all this kind of stuff. Just over time, it's like, what else can we do? Like, what else can we experiment with that can improve? I don't know, did it make any fucking impact, but I still just do it anyway because I enjoy doing it. And maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I won't know unless I try it, right? That's the main thing.
And ultimately, you never leave behind the fundamentals, and that's something you just layer on top.
There's only like a few core fundamentals anyway in life, you know what I mean? In terms of like if you bring your business down to like literally 3 core components, which is like you need to do like more sales, you need to like improve your marketing, you need to improve like your fulfillment. All right, okay, we just focus on those 3 things and nothing else. Same with fitness. We lift heavy shit, we eat less or we eat more depending on what we're trying to do, and that's kind of it, right? And it's the same with relationships. And I kind of apply that kind of first principle approach to pretty much everything I do, and tried to add that kind of human element into it every once in a while, right? To remove the just pure robotic sense, but having that robotic sense in terms of this is what actually will work for the long term.
Darren, this has been a remarkable conversation. It's been so interesting for me to be able to just throw questions at you for probably about an hour and 20 minutes now. Someone, as you're reflecting on having that vision in some elements, I see you as being, several steps ahead of me in the process. And the insights, and it's very obvious from the conversation how many embedded quotes you're using to demonstrate your points, just how much value it is from taking pieces from the podcast conversations you've had and the life experience, and obviously the direction you're going is all super inspiring, and being like, okay, I can actually do that. And I hope that people listening to this get that same sense of like you're just a normal bloke that just didn't give up and you were relentless, and that's what's resulted in the place that you are now. If you want to get in touch,
And I appreciate it, man.
if you want to get in touch and follow
I
you, where
appreciate
can
it,
they do
man.
that?
Firstly, I want to say a massive thank you, man. If you want to do these sessions in the future, just let me know. Happy to do this whenever, of course. And I think the main idea is just to just keep on going. It's the whole idea. So just for context, you can contact me on Instagram, so darrenlee.ks, or LinkedIn is where I write a lot more of my, I would say, authority content, quote unquote. Or you can check out the podcast on YouTube too. So that's Darren_KS as well. So kickoff sessions is pretty much everywhere too. So yeah, happy to connect with people. If people find this valuable, let me know. I'm always happy to go deeper on these points. And as I mentioned, I can do more of these sessions in the future. I'd love to help out in any regard, man.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Legend.